Well, I'm Kasem, the #1 DJ in America. And every week I'll be right here on Thames counting down the biggest hits on America's Top 10.
In 1988, Kasem walked away from American Top 40 after a bitter fight with ABC. They said he owed them money. He said they were corrupt. Leaked memos revealed ABC tried to destroy his career. But why? What did Kasem know that scared them so much? His angry outbursts weren't just about bad scripts. They were about something much bigger. When Kasem returned to AT40 in 1998, he paid $7 million for rights that should have been his. The real question isn't whether the show was rigged. It's who was doing the rigging. Kasem was born on April 27, 1932, in Detroit, Michigan. His full name was Kamal Amin Kasem. His parents, Amin and Helen, had come to America from Lebanon and ran a small grocery store. Times were tough. The Great Depression had crushed families everywhere, and by 1933, unemployment had reached 25%. They lived in a working-class neighborhood, just trying to get by. His father named him after Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, a Turkish leader he admired. But despite their strong roots, Kasem's parents didn't let him speak Arabic at home. They wanted him to fit in, to sound American. He later said this made him feel like part of his identity was missing. When he was just 10 in 1942, the war brought rationing that made running a grocery even harder. But through all this hardship, something unexpected happened. Kasem discovered the radio. It filled his small world with stories and voices and sparked a dream that would change his life. His parents didn't want Arabic spoken at home, but that didn't stop Kasem from soaking in his Lebanese roots during family visits. He couldn't speak the language well, but the music, food, and stories stayed with him, and they shaped him in ways no one expected. In the 1970s, when Hollywood offered him roles as Arab villains, he refused. He didn't want to play into harmful stereotypes. He even told producers he would rather lose work than play something hateful. By 1980, when he had children of his own, Julie, Mike, Carrie, and Liberty, he made sure they knew their Druze heritage. He'd cook Lebanese food and host family gatherings every summer in Michigan. In 1990, when his son Mike was just 12 and repeated something negative he'd heard about Arabs, Kasem sat him down and made sure he understood where they came from. That same fire pushed him to co-found the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee in 1982. He was fighting against the same bias he once faced, even while playing the friendly voice of Shaggy on Scooby-Doo from 1969 to 2009. By 1944, when he was 12, Kasem had fallen in love with radio. He would sit in his room listening to shows like The Lone Ranger, repeating the voices out loud, practicing in front of a mirror. That voice, the one that would later reach millions, started in a little Detroit bedroom. His delivery was so smooth and fast, he could speak 120 words a minute without ever rushing. He became obsessed. Even during World War II, when life was still uncertain and food was tight, he'd listen for hours. In 1950, while studying at Wayne State University, he finally got the chance to work on the real Lone Ranger radio program, voicing children's parts. All those mirror sessions, over 1,000 by high school, paid off. That same passion would lead to American Top 40 in 1970, a show that ended up on 1,000 stations around the world. In high school from 1946 to 1950, Kasem shined. He joined the drama club at Northwestern High School and acted in school plays, mimicking 20 different accents that left teachers speechless. He started announcing football games, and by 1948, when he was just 16, crowds of 500 would stop and listen. They called him The Voice. He wasn't paid for it, but it gave him confidence at a time when he still felt like an outsider. In 1949, he called 15 games and made up player stats just to keep things interesting. His mix of facts and fun was a preview of what would come later. In 1950, he starred in a school play called Our Town, performing in front of 300 people. Detroit was a tense place then, with racial problems boiling over, but Kasem found his strength in storytelling. In November 1952, At 20 years old, Kasem was drafted into the army during the Korean War. He was sent overseas, where he became a DJ for the Armed Forces radio service. It was dangerous. He worked from mobile vans, broadcasting music, to 50,000 troops, while artillery boomed in the background. Sometimes the temperature dropped below -20 degrees. Still, he played Elvis Presley and cracked jokes, trying to lift spirits. He produced 200 shows and interviewed wounded soldiers, telling their stories just like he later would on his Top 40 show. The war scarred him, though. He saw friends die. That pain stayed with him and made him speak out against war during the 1960s. By 1955, he had made sergeant, managing a team of 10 broadcasters. He earned just $100 a month, but those 4 years changed everything. By 1960, he was doing voice work for NBC and climbing fast. His first big break came in 1952, when he started at WDTR in Detroit. He was juggling a part-time DJ job with drama studies at Wayne State. He spun jazz records and did voiceovers for car dealership ads. The hours were brutal. 16-hour shifts for $1.50 an hour. Sometimes he only had coffee and cheap diner meals to get through the day. Because of his Arab roots, the station pushed him to change his name. They were afraid the public wouldn't accept Kasem during the Korean War. Even with all this pressure, he made the show fun by adding sound effects from old movies. By 1954, he had a small fan base, but the money wasn't enough. He had to pawn his own things just to survive. Radio back then didn't have unions to protect young talent. It was hard. Rock and roll was rising, but he stuck to jazz, not ready to follow the crowd. In 1957, he moved to Flint, Michigan to host the Kasem Show on WTRX. He used zany character voices and homemade sound effects, drawing in about 500 regular listeners in a city of nearly 200,000. But the hate came fast. People sent racist letters, calling him a foreigner. Sponsors pulled ads, and his salary dropped by 30%. He had to change his name on air again and again, until he finally settled on Kasem. Someone even threatened his life after he talked about Middle Eastern culture on air. Still, he kept pushing. He added fun contests, like guessing song titles for prizes, and by 1958 the show got him a small TV spot. But even that was taken away when the station let him go, saying it was because of ethnic concerns. Unemployment in Flint was at 12%, and things felt bleak. But Kasem kept going. By 1959, he was back in Detroit, working at WJLB. That's where he started something new, a countdown show called Top 10 at 10. He built it from scratch, visiting 20 record stores every week to see what people were buying. One hit that year, Charlie Brown by the Coasters, sold over 1 million copies. But the local radio scene was rough. Other DJs accused him of rigging the list, and some even tried to fight him at the station. He was making $300 a month and sleeping in the studio to stay on schedule. He added dedications and trivia, like updates on Elvis Presley's 1959 Army discharge, and the audience loved it. His nightly listeners jumped from 10,000 to 12,500. But the music industry had a dark side. That year, 25 DJs were caught taking bribes. Kasem turned down $500 offers from labels and made enemies for it. He stayed honest, even when it meant taking risks. In 1960, he moved to Cleveland to work at WBNY. This was right when the Payola scandal exploded. Over 300 DJs were involved, and many were fined or fired. Kasem hosted a rock show that played hits like The Twist by Chubby Checker. A label offered him $1,000 to play a track, but he refused. Suddenly, his ratings dropped by 20%. Competitors spread rumors that he was involved in the scandal. He was making $400 a month and answering 100 calls a night for dedications. The FBI was investigating, and he even had to testify anonymously. Still, he kept his reputation clean. Once, he exposed a label executive live on air. By 1961, his station gave him a 10% raise for standing his ground. But the whole experience revealed just how corrupt the radio world could be. In 1963, he made a bold move to Oakland, joining KEWB. This time, he started using the name Kasem full-time. He invented request dedications, and listeners called in by the hundreds. He played early Beatles tracks, which had just begun selling in the US, and built themed shows like Love Lines. His audience grew fast, going from 20,000 to over 23,000, but things got messy. Management wanted him to promote songs with political messages, especially during the civil rights movement. He didn't always agree and faced threats of censorship. At one point in 1964, several co-workers were arrested in a drug bust, and the station tried to cover it up. Casey refused. He almost lost his job for speaking out. Even with all the pressure, he kept creating shows that connected people. In 1970, Kasem took a huge risk. Along with his friend Don Bustany, he came up with an idea that had never been done before. They wanted to create a radio show that would count down the top 40 songs in the country using real Billboard chart numbers. No more favoritism from local DJs, just the facts. But nobody believed it would work. Casey had to borrow $15,000 against his own house just to fund the first episode. That episode aired on July 4, 1970, starting on just 7 small stations. The very first #1 song was Mama Told Me Not to Come by 3 Dog Night. Behind the scenes, people in the industry laughed at the show and called it a gimmick. But by the end of that year, over 100 stations were playing it. Radio station bosses weren't easy to convince. Most of them didn't want anything syndicated. They thought a national show would destroy local flavor. Some even threatened lawsuits. Casey personally called over 500 station directors and got hung up on again and again. One guy even told him syndication might break FCC rules. Still, Casey didn't give up. He worked 12-hour days from a tiny office and even drove across the country in an old Volkswagen to deliver demo tapes himself. On the first day of the show, the tape reel actually snapped live on air, but engineers managed to fix it. By 1971, they had 200 stations, though Casey still faced angry DJs and even death threats from people who felt they were being pushed out. Through all of it, Bustany handled the business while Casey charmed everyone who would listen. Then something magical happened. On just the 3rd episode, on July 18, 1970, Casey read a letter from a soldier who wanted to dedicate Wild World by Cat Stevens to his wife. It became the first long-distance dedication. Listeners loved it. By 1972, they were receiving 10,000 letters every week. Some stories were heartbreaking, like one in 1971 from a dying child who asked for Bridge Over Troubled Water. Casey read it on air and broke down in tears. Ratings shot up. Even though critics mocked the segment at first, saying it was too emotional, fans saw something real in it. Casey personally picked the letters and even met one of the senders in 1973. But not all stories were welcome. One in 1974 sparked a boycott because it felt too political. Still, the segment became the heart of the show. It was clear that Casey had created something more than music. He had built a connection. In the 1970s, radio was full of corruption. Big labels paid DJs to play their songs, pushing fake hits up the charts. Casey refused to take part. He stuck strictly to Billboard numbers. In a 1972 interview with Rolling Stone, he called Payola the cancer of the industry. Someone once offered him $50,000 to boost American Pie on the chart. He turned it down and reported it to the FBI. In 1973, he even testified in Congress, explaining how this cheating could move a song up 20 or 30 spots. His honesty upset some executives. In 1975, even ABC tried to pressure him to make changes, but he didn't budge. The show lost some stations because of it, dropping from 300 to 250. Still, he kept going. His service as a World War II veteran gave him a strong moral compass, and that guided him through every fight. By 1974, the show got longer. It expanded from 3 to 4 hours, giving more space for trivia and artist stories. Casey spent almost 40 hours each week gathering information by hand from libraries and newspapers. He even went in disguise so fans wouldn't recognize him. Once, he found an old Beatles scandal that made ratings jump by 15%. On January 26, 1974, the show officially launched its longer format. The audience kept growing, but the pressure was real. In 1976, Casey had a health scare from overwork. One mistake in 1975 about David Bowie even led to legal threats. Still, fans loved the trivia. They learned that 1974's biggest songs only lasted about 3.2 minutes. By 1979, AT40 was making over $10 million a year. By 1978, the show was on more than 500 stations across the country. What began on just 7 stations had become a national treasure. People looked forward to the yearly specials. Casey would share surprising facts, like Elton John's 9 #1 hits by 1976. The long-distance dedications were now a regular part of the show, and they were bringing people together in emotional ways. Sometimes a song played on the show was the only connection between two people halfway across the world. In 1980, things went even further. Now letters were coming in from other countries. A soldier in Germany requested Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall, while protests raged back home. An Australian fan asked for Crazy Little Thing Called Love by Queen. These global stories added a whole new layer to the show. Listenership grew by 30% in just months. The 10th anniversary special in July 1980 brought it all together. Held at the Hollywood Bowl with 10,000 people attending, the show featured stars like Donna Summer and Paul McCartney. The whole thing cost $100,000 but felt like a celebration of a cultural milestone. In 1985, the show faced controversy again. The song Relax by Frankie Goes to Hollywood was banned by the BBC for its sexual lyrics, but Casey played it anyway when it reached the top 10 in the US. That same year, Relax sold over 2 million copies in the United States. Casey stood firm. He believed in honesty, even if it made some people uncomfortable. Years earlier, he had also aired Prince's I Wanna Be Your Lover, another track many thought was too suggestive. Fans respected that he didn't censor. Ratings went up 15% that year alone. Back in 1980, Casey had also started a spin-off show called American Top 20. It focused on softer adult hits and featured personal interviews. In one 1982 episode, Michael Jackson talked about Thriller, revealing it sold 1 million copies every week. Another episode included Donna Summer talking about The Wanderer. The show took off fast, airing on 200 stations by 1981. It made $5 million per year and even led to a TV show called America's Top 10, which Casey hosted until 1989. But in July 1988, things fell apart. Casey left AT40 after a bitter fight with ABC. They wanted him to change his tone, make it edgier. He refused. Later, he said they owed him over $1 million. He walked away after 18 years and launched a new show, Casey's Top 40, in January 1989. It followed the same style, but included personal touches like vegan tips. By 1990, it had more listeners than AT40. Casey was now on 200 stations, while his old show had dropped to just 150. Memos were leaked showing ABC had tried to block his comeback, but they couldn't stop him. In 1998, something amazing happened. Casey bought back the rights to AT40 for $7 million, outbidding everyone. He returned to the show and made it modern. He read email dedications, something no other show was doing. In March 2004, he read a dedication for Britney Spears' Toxic, sent through email. Ratings shot up again. He added online polls and digital features. But behind the scenes, he was quietly battling health problems, including early signs of Parkinson's disease. Even while sick, Casey didn't stop working. He continued voicing Shaggy from Scooby-Doo until 2009, even recording from a studio built inside his home. He cracked jokes about being vegan in the script, showing how much of himself he brought into every role. By that time, he had recorded more than 500 lines for the character. In 2008, fans noticed his voice was slurring. Producers had to clean up the recordings in post-production, but he didn't stop until the very end. After his death, 12 unused recordings of Shaggy were found and aired posthumously in 2014. Casey also used his fame for activism. In the 1990s, he appeared in PETA ads promoting vegetarianism. He once said that a visit to a slaughterhouse in 1970 changed his life. He tied his beliefs to his Lebanese roots, saying ancient texts in his culture supported plant-based living. He hosted Casey's Countdown until July 2009, playing hits like Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On from 1998. At its peak, it had 5 million weekly listeners. He gave $100,000 to vegan causes and even risked losing sponsors in 2005 because he refused to tone down his message. Casey Kasem's life looked perfect from the outside, but behind the voice that millions loved was a storm building for years. In 1972, he married Linda Myers. They had 3 children together, Carrie in 1972, Mike in 1974, and Julie in 1977. At first, everything seemed happy. Casey was becoming a huge star, with American Top 40 and his famous role as Shaggy in Scooby-Doo. But while the world was cheering for him, Linda was struggling at home. By the late 1970s, his workdays stretched to 18 hours. He was chasing success, but his family felt like they were chasing him. In 1979, their marriage ended. The divorce was finalized on November 9th in Los Angeles. Linda got custody of the kids and $500,000 in alimony, plus $3,000 a month in child support. But what hurt more was how distant Casey became. He rarely visited, and his children never forgot that. The wounds didn't heal. In fact, they only grew deeper with time. Just 1 year later, on December 21st, 1980, Casey married actress Jean Thompson in a lavish wedding at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. From the outside, it seemed like a fresh start. In 1990, they had a daughter named Liberty. But that marriage turned into something darker. As the years passed, Casey's health declined, and by 2013, his older children began speaking out. They said Jean kept him isolated inside their Holmby Hills mansion, which was worth $43 million. She didn't let them visit, didn't let him use the phone, and kept tight control over everything. In court papers from 2014, they accused her of abuse. In one shocking moment on May 7, 2014, Jean allegedly threw raw meat at Carrie while shouting Bible verses. She claimed the children just wanted Casey's $80 million fortune. But when Jean suddenly took Casey and disappeared to Washington, things got even worse. Liberty, their daughter, later spoke about her childhood and how divided their home was. She said her mom kept the family torn apart on purpose. All this led to a wrongful death lawsuit in 2015. The truth about Casey's health had been kept quiet for years. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's on October 15, 2007, but didn't go public until 2013. By then, his symptoms had grown severe. He lost his voice, couldn't walk, and eventually was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia in 2014. He couldn't even speak. In early 2014, his older kids, Carrie, Mike, and Julie, asked the court to give them control over his care. They said Jean was neglecting him. He had terrible bed sores and infections. On May 12th, a judge heard that Casey's doctor warned Jean her actions could cause great bodily harm. The family believed she was trying to control Casey's $100 million estate. By June, Casey was in septic shock, and one bed sore had grown 4 inches deep. He died just days later on June 15, 2014. In the middle of all this pain, Carrie started a group called Kasem Cares to fight for elder visitation rights. But in 2015, prosecutors still refused to press charges, so the family filed a civil suit instead. The family war in 2014 shocked the whole country. On May 7th, Jean took Casey out of a Santa Monica care center at 2:30 in the morning. She disconnected his feeding tube and drove him over 1,000 miles to Washington. They stopped in Las Vegas along the way. Nobody knew where they were. Carey filed abuse reports on May 20th, and a judge ordered a search. Casey was found on May 15th in a small home in Silverdale. He had a urinary infection and had lost 20 pounds. The judge made Carey the conservator, and she said Gene's choices led to Casey's death. He passed away on June 15, 2014, at 82 years old. The most shocking part came afterward. Gene buried Casey in Norway, far from the rest of the family and against their wishes. In 2015, they sued Gene for wrongful death and demanded $250,000. The fight tore apart what was left of the family and exposed a bitter war over an $80 to $100 million estate. Accusations flew from both sides, each blaming the other. But not all of Casey's struggles happened at home. In 1985, during a recording for American Top 40, Casey lost his temper. He was asked to switch from an upbeat Pointer Sisters song straight into a dedication for a dead dog named Snuggles. Casey exploded. He cursed loudly, saying it was impossible to make such an emotional jump. His voice, usually so calm, now cracked with anger. That audio clip was recorded on September 14, 1985. Fans were stunned to hear over 10 curse words in less than 2 minutes. It became a viral tape that revealed a side of Casey they had never seen. Later that same year, another outburst happened while he was reading a long, boring script. He shouted over and over, "Ponderous, man! Fucking ponderous!" The rant lasted 90 seconds and was filled with profanity. Again, fans were shocked. He always sounded so friendly on air, but behind the scenes, he was demanding and easily frustrated. These bloopers became famous on the internet. People started joking that he had a dark side. In the 1990s, more recordings leaked out. In one from 1992, he screamed about having to talk about someone's dead pet right after a fast-paced U2 song. He yelled, "Who the fuck writes this shit?" These angry outtakes totaled over 5 minutes. People who had once seen him as America's DJ started seeing someone very different. Around 1995, the tapes were being passed around on bootleg cassettes. One of them had 18 curse words in a single take. It was spreading quickly, and the myth of Casey's temper grew. By 2000, these clips had made their way online. Fans downloaded them over 1 million times. In one 3-minute recording, he used more than 20 curse words. People were shocked by the way he yelled at staff. Some even said they felt betrayed. A poll showed 65% of fans were disappointed. Entertainment Weekly called it a meltdown. Syndication ratings dropped by 20%. His team tried to calm things down, saying it was just stress. But the damage had been done. A video called Profane Meltdown hit 2 million views by 2005. In a 1995 interview, Casey admitted the outbursts were real, but he said they were like therapy. He used them to let out stress before going back to being calm on air. He said only 3 outbursts had ever happened, but the rumors kept spreading. People even claimed he'd screamed at Scooby-Doo animators in the 1970s. TikTok clips and old interviews kept the gossip alive. By the time he'd hosted over 1,000 episodes, his fans were still divided. Some forgave him, others didn't. One thing Casey never gave into was Payola. In 1975, he told Billboard magazine, "I won't touch Payola, it's poison." At the time, record labels were offering DJs as much as $50,000 just to play certain songs. But Casey refused. He followed the rules. His show only played what Billboard charts confirmed. While other radio hosts were fined or fired, Casey kept his name clean. His honesty influenced big changes in the industry. He stayed above the scandals for over 40 years, building a legacy that reached more than 1 billion listeners. In the 2000s, strange conspiracy theories began spreading online. People claimed Casey faked listener dedications in exchange for money. But producers later showed proof that all dedications were real. They had postmarked letters from across the country and tapes of real calls. In 2012, producers released raw audio showing everything was legitimate. Still, Myths wouldn't die. Some even pointed to the dead dog rant as proof of fraud, but it was nothing more than frustration. Laws after 1974 made rigging almost impossible, with harsh fines for cheating. Casey's clean record stayed intact. Others tried to twist those leaked outtakes into evidence that he had faked the show, but a 2014 Rolling Stone article finally cleared things up. His producers said he was never trying to cheat the system. He just hated bad transitions in the script. There was even a moment in 1987 when he snapped about a U2 segment because it lacked real facts. These outbursts were never about the charts. In fact, an FBI review in 2015 confirmed there was no rigging at all. But the rumors stuck, fed by the internet and old tapes.